Hi, this is Braschek, and we're recording this on December 6th, 2020. And I keep waiting for some professional scientist to come forward and tell you all this, but I guess they're not. There are real scientists out there. For some reason, a lot of them just are all tied up in knots or are just not very articulate. We lost one of the great ones, unfortunately, in the summer of 2019, Kary Mullis. But he would be the first to tell you that science is not, and Nobel Prize winner, by the way, he'd be the first to tell you that science is not the special province of a class of high priests who get to declare what is real and what is not real. Science is an ongoing investigation, and anybody that's willing to use their mind is allowed to participate. And when it involves your health and the health of people you care about and the health of your community and the health of your family and your country, you are more than entitled to be involved. And here's the Nobel Prize winning Kary Mullis, who unfortunately passed away in 2019, who will tell you the same thing. He also happens to be the inventor of the PCR test, and that's the test that Fauci and friends have been using to defraud the public. He was complaining about their frauds way back in the 1980s. And here's some clips about that.
And I understand there are a lot of people, if you ask them about HIV causing AIDS as being a fact, they'll say, of course, it's indisputable. And the very fact that they will say it's indisputable might lead you to question their ability to understand the scientific method. People that think any scientific fact is indisputable don't understand about scientific fact.
It has become a very emotional kind of thing because people actually, they get personally committed to what really is a body of evidence that can be analyzed, by lots of people. And at this point, there's so much of it out there, nobody can really analyze it, all of it. But nobody can write a review of it that says HIV causes AIDS because of this. If a postdoc were to write a review of the literature that showed without much doubt that HIV was the cause of AIDS, that guy would be famous. Now, there's 100,000 guys out there who've had the opportunity. 10 years has passed. We've been waiting for this star postdoctoral fellow to distinguish himself forever and get a lifelong grant from Tony Fauci, but he hasn't shown up. No one has bothered to write a definitive review. Any journal would take it. That right there proves that HIV does not cause AIDS.
So we're going to just do a little basic science here. It's hard to know where to begin, but let's start with the deadly virus. Okay. Fundamental, and there's not a medical shill out there that can dispute what I'm about to say. Fundamentally, here's how it works. For you to claim that something creates a disease, you have to be able to, what they call purify. We would use the word isolate just to make it clearer. You have to isolate that thing, get a absolute clear picture of it, and then prove that it actually creates a specific disease. It helps if you have a coherent or can describe a coherent mechanism by which the particular thing causes the particular disease that you're claiming. In addition to the faked and fraudulent death certificates, in addition to the criminally incompetent, incompetence not even an accurate word, just criminal way many so-called COVID patients have been basically murdered by medical incompetence. In addition to the bogus testing, there's a whole lot of other flaws to this thing that are fundamental. All right, so let's take a look at the picture of the virus. Okay, you've seen this picture, I'm sure, many times. Were you aware that it's not a photograph of anything? It is a computer-generated image. Does it matter? I think it does. I think it does. This image is based on a theory of the existence of a particular virus that has particular characteristics. And they took that theory and comic book style created it and generated a multicolor computer generated image. And this is what you see everywhere in all the newscasts, and it's everywhere. It ain't real. They might as well have a picture of Bugs Bunny or Superman for all the reality this has, okay? So here's what the real picture looks like. And you may say, well, gee, I'm not qualified to evaluate this. Well, you're qualified to evaluate the difference between what it actually looks like and what they're telling you it looks like. No special PhD needed there. And this is what it looks like. And if you're looking at this and saying, gee, I don't really see much because I'm not really trained in this. Well, then you're an honest person, and you're a person with good natural humility. So I found somebody that is qualified to talk about images like this. In fact, he's one of the world's most qualified people to talk about images like this. Let's take a look and listen to what he has to say about another Tony Fauci engineered fraud.
Still unclear about the evidence for HIV's existence, I decided the best way to verify it would be to actually see it. I asked Dr. Hans Gelderblum, a world-renowned electron microscopist, if he thought there was any reason to question Dr. Montanier's published images.
I've seen these publications, stamp-sized images. It's a nuisance. It's a nuisance. You do not really see much.
When we saw that photo, we said, suggestive, but not convincing.
Dr. Gallo, 1 year later, published photographs he claimed to be of HIV. Were his any better?
These pictures were not so impressive. They were not much better than Montanier's images.
Okay, we're back. So just to recap, we've been told that the SARS-2 virus creates a disease called COVID. That disease is deadly, and we have to shut down the world to save humanity. Right? So we've just seen that they in fact have not identified any virus adequately. What they have is a sketchy photograph and a theory. That's it, folks. That's what this is based on. Okay? But it gets better. Go to the CDC's own website. Okay? Don't take my word for it. Read their own words. And read their description of what COVID is. I'm going to read it for you, but please do not trust me. In fact, do not trust anything that I or anybody else says. Go and look into all this for yourself and use their own published material. Right? Don't read conspiracy theories. Don't go off on the Judy Miskowitz, rat hole. You don't need to do that. You don't need conspiracy theories. You don't need any of that stuff. Just read their own statements, their own published statements, and use your own mind and use your own intelligence. Okay, so I'm at the CDC.gov website, the official source of all information about COVID. Here's what they say COVID-19 is: fever or chills, cough, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, fatigue, muscle or body aches, headache, new loss of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea or vomiting, diarrhea. That's it, folks. These symptoms could be anything. Could be the flu. Could be a cold. By the way, since no one's told you, the common cold is a coronavirus. It was yesterday, it was a year ago, and it was 10,000 years ago. There is nothing new about coronaviruses. They are not a new, never-before-seen thing in the history of modern medicine. Okay? And look that up. Don't believe me. You've been lied to about that. So I'm going to read these symptoms one more time. Fever or chills. Cough. Right? This could be allergy. This could be sinus infection. This could be the flu. This could be a cold. Fatigue. Muscle or body aches. Headache. That could be exposure to chemicals, loss of taste or smell. A lot of things can cause that. Sore throat, right? That everything that signifies that a body is fighting something or dealing with something, they are now calling COVID. So this is the CDC. I'm not getting this from a comic book. This is their own description of what they're calling COVID. So number one, they say that there's a virus and that they have identified it and isolated it and documented it. They have done no such thing. Number two, they say that this virus creates a disease that they're calling COVID, and when you actually read their own freaking description of what COVID is, it could be anything. Okay? So what's next? Well, why don't we figure out, let's assume they're right. Right, that there is a disease called COVID that's never before been seen in human existence, and it kills people. Happens to kill people who were already quite close to being dead anyway. But that's let's just say it kills people. Okay, the next piece that is missing from this fraud is there has to be a mechanism. Okay, if a black cat walks into my room and I, God forbid, have a stroke, I don't get to say that a black cat caused the stroke. That's not science. Okay, somebody has to at least describe a mechanism by which the black cat caused the stroke. Okay, they're not even bothering to do that. All right, so we don't even have a cause and effect description of how this virus, what are the mechanics by which this thing, we'll assume it exists, we'll take their word for it, we'll take their comic book picture that they don't have proper documentation of, and we'll assume that it exists and it's exactly what they say. Tell me how that fragment of genetic material kills people. I know how people die. I know how people die of pneumonia. We know all these things. These are not new things. We know how people in stage 4 cancer die. We know how people who have advanced cases of diabetes die. We know how people who have advanced dementia die. Okay, none of this is a mystery. But you don't get to put a COVID label on those deaths, especially when you can't show a mechanism by which this genetic material goes into the human body and kills it. And we know from statistics that it doesn't kill healthy people. I mean, that's not even debatable anymore. So at the very root of this whole thing, there is no there. They don't have adequate documentation of the virus. They don't have adequate documentation that this is a discrete disease at all. Now, I have heard some very bright people talk about the fact that there's a kind of syndrome that a tiny fragment of people have that looks a whole lot like an air pollution injury, like a hydrogen cyanide injury, such as you could get in Wuhan. You could definitely get it in northern Italy. You could definitely get it in Tehran. People don't, remember there were all those cases in Iran? Everybody's like, oh, it's a mystery. Tehran's one of the most, it's like LA on steroids. It is horrifically polluted. And then, of course, New York City is very polluted, and a lot of the cases came out of the South Bronx. And people may not be aware, but there's an elevated superhighway, national highway, running right through the South Bronx. And all day, under a normal day, you have backed up traffic, diesel trucks sitting there, raining diesel fumes down on the population there. It has the highest rate of childhood asthma in the country. It's a medical disaster zone, always has been. So this is where people have been dying in the greatest of numbers because they are already sick and compromised. All right. So just to recap, they're claiming that they've isolated, their technical term purified, the SARS-2 virus. They have done no such thing. They are claiming that a wide range of common symptoms is diagnosable as something called COVID. That is medical fraud. Okay? And they're not even bothering to try to articulate the cause and effect mechanism by which this thing that they say exists in the form they say it exists creates death. Right? So the fraud here is epic. And it's a bit frustrating that it's December 6th. And I feel like I'm a lone voice in the wilderness. I know there are people talking about this, but I just don't get why people aren't drilling down and focusing on the fundamentals and the basics of this thing. It's not happening. If you happen to, be a donor to any one of the, dozens of so-called resistance leaders out there who are sucking up a lot of time, money, and attention and not doing anything to educate the public about the fundamentals of this fraud, write them and pressure them. It's one thing for CNN and NBC and the New York Times and the Washington Post and NPR and the BBC and all those professional liars to carry on the way they're carrying on. It's another thing when, and I'll be charitable here and not mention their names, but it's another thing when people are supposedly, alternative crusading journalists, and you tune to their podcasts and they're talking about, oh, isn't Biden a terrible choice for president? Yeah, we get it. Yeah, we get that. Okay, the house is on fire, guys. Get your heads out of your ass, learn a little science, and forget the partisan bullshit politics and start looking at this really dangerous and sinister thing that's happening in our country and our world. Okay, that's Brass Check, and hope you found this edifying and even amusing. Really do put pressure on the, I'm going to name one of them, Jimmy Dore. I'm going to name another one, Lee Camp. Okay, these are people who, when they had less than 10,000 YouTube subscribers, were promoted heavily by Brass Check, and everybody who's a long-time Brass Check subscriber knows that. Okay, I'm glad they're successful. I'm glad they're at the top of their game. Okay, it's time for some payback to the people who put you where you are. We don't need to hear any more, comedy routines about how bad Joseph Biden is. We get it. That wasn't news a year ago. It's not news today. What we need is someone to look at basic science and basic rationality. It's long past time. You guys and others owe the public this, and it's time. It's time.